Green Eller was the one person that was living at that time that knew about this grave. And they brought him over here. And they were fixing to erect the grave, and they were rows across this hill of just field stones. And they said, well, which is Tom's grave? And he said, well, I don't know which grave he's in, but I know he's here. So what they did, they picked out a spot.
Whippoorwill Academy was built in 1880 over about a mile from here on the Beaver Creek Road, and it was built back up in the woods. And my husband's great-grandfather didn't like where it was going to be built, and he made a very sarcastic remark. It's so far back in the woods, not even the whippoorwills can find it. And that name stuck, and has been called Whippoorwill Academy ever since.
I went to the Whippoorwill Academy, they called it. It was just a little one-teacher school.
And what I'm doing with these, I'm working on these right here. This is a very old pyre. This is probably at least 100 years old. And I'm reshaping the handles and adjusting this so that I can hold the metal in the fire.
Whippoorwill Academy was located on the Peeler Hayes farm until 1986. It was then dismantled, moved, and reconstructed on the Ferguson Carter farm less than a mile from its original location by Hill and Edith Ferguson Carter. The school, reconstructed as it was originally, is being used as a local museum. In the loft are the paintings and drawings of the legend of Tom Dooley and Dooley memorabilia. This little two-room country store was moved from its original location a mile away from the Whippoorwill Academy and Village in the Ferguson community to join other historical buildings in the village. The first store, built in the 1920s, was washed away in the 1940 flood, and this building was built with lumber from the flood to replace it. On display are products of early years. For sale are lovely handmade crafts, books, tapes, jams, jellies, pickles, and many other items. Daniel Boone, his wife, and 8 children lived in this community in the 1760s. One cabin was on the Beaver Creek, and the other was located across the Yadkin River. This cabin is built on the description and size of the one on the Beaver Creek and has the original rocks from his chimney. Boone made his trips into Kentucky from here. This little building has been constructed from a log smokehouse built in the late 1700s on the upper end of the Ferguson farm. It's used as an art gallery and has artists and craftsmen on display each month. Close by is a tiny smokehouse reconstructed with all original logs of the 18th century. The other buildings in Whippoorwill Village include the Chapel of Peace, crafted from an old log cabin and featuring a 1901 pump organ as well as a 19th century church bell, and pulpit from the old Ferguson United Methodist Church. The Ferguson family home, upon which Whippoorwill Academy is situated, has been in the Ferguson family since the 1700s.
We're on top of the hill at the cemetery where Greeley, Minton, and his wife are buried, along with the Williamses, and we're overlooking Ferguson as of today. Mr. Minton, when the railroad came through in 1910, 1912, and I may be off on that date, but anyway, along about the time the railroad came through, he took this farm and subdivided it into a town.
The cause which prevented the church at Beaver Creek from holding its regular meeting on the third Saturday in April 1865 was the following. A lawless band of rogues, deserters, and bushwhackers moving here deprived the honest citizens of all means of self-defense, and having by their friends and sympathizers reputed that a strong force of Yankees were encamped at Deep Gap to overrun the citizens and protect the raiders in their plundering, such that law-abiding citizens were afraid to leave home and property unprotected, and at the mercy of the midnight raiders and their families to be insulted and abused by the bandits by day and night on the Wednesday night previous to the April meeting, as roving bands of rogues, robbers, with 5 or 6 Negroes and Indians, making about 30 or 40 men, visited their neighborhoods with guns and pistols, and commanded by E.A. Davis, an infamous scoundrel, and guarded by W.L. Dula and Drew Adkins, and did then plunder the quiet citizens of Beaver Creek of a large quantity of grain, bacon, flour, lard, meal, horses, oxen, and wagons, beehives, turkeys, and chickens, in which consequence Beaver Creek church members were prevented from attending their meeting to protect their homes and families. James Larkin Pearson said in his boyhood days around Beaver Creek he had some acquaintance with perhaps a dozen preachers who came there to preach at different times, several Baptist preachers and a few Adventist preachers. Most of them were well educated, and one or two were real pulpit orators. But only one of them ever paid any attention to me, he said. Reverend Robert L. Isbell, a young Adventist preacher, was the only one I could ever think of as a personal friend. He belonged to a well-to-do family in Caldwell County, and he was sometimes the preacher at the Adventist Church of Beaver Creek. I always tried to be there and hear him preach. We never spent very much time together, but we had some personal correspondence, and I found his letters were a treasure to me. Elkville, North Carolina, became Ferguson. Tom Dula announced that he was born in 1845 in Elkville. Elkville Academy was functioning in 1884 and 1890 with C.A. Horton as principal. General William Horton was the first chairman of the Board of Common Schools in Wilkes County. Elkville was one of the oldest settlements in Wilkes County, located at the confluence of Elk Creek and the Yadkin River. It was a small, scattered village, but an ideal location for the town, which it never got to be. Daniel Boone lived in the western portion of the county on Beaver Creek, near the Yadkin River, from 1766 to 1775. He settled on the upper Yadkin River. Boone was 34 years old the first winter he spent in Wilkes. Fair-haired and blue-eyed, wiry, and about 5 feet 10 inches tall. His wife, Rebecca Bryan, was 29, and they had 6 children. During 1769, Boone left Rebecca and their children in Wilkes as he led an expedition to Kentucky. While he was gone, Rebecca bore a third son, Daniel Morgan. When he finally returned, he found the family in happy circumstances. The Daniel Boone wagon train was an annual tradition for many years. The first one was held in 1963. This 40-mile, 3-day march along the trail Daniel Boone forged from Ferguson to Boone included 25 wagons and over 100 participants. Many of the wagons were pulled by oxen, and there was even a stagecoach. When one thinks of wagon trains in Wilkes County, it's synonymous with Ivy Moore, a descendant of Daniel Boone, who was the chief scout for the wagon train that had its beginning at Ferguson, near the Daniel Boone home place, and ended near the Parkway and followed the route he took in crossing the Blue Ridge. It was an annual tradition for about 18 years, beginning in 1958 and lasting until 1976. It traveled through Ferguson and Darby and across the mountains to Boone. The wagon train had about 8 covered wagons, 6 scouts, and a number of pack horses. It tried to duplicate Boone's trek in 1773. The 3-day trip featured stops at the same places where Boone camped. They carried Kentucky rifles, axes, old cooking utensils, and clothing that was typical of Boone's party. Ginn Laurelmoor Resort is a new private resort community planned for 6,000 acres near Boone and Blowing Rock, North Carolina. It will offer a Tom Kite signature golf course, a mountain lodge with fine dining and wine cellar, Camp Laurelmoor for kids, and 4 seasons of activity to engage all 5 senses. The Yadkin River is one of the longest rivers in North Carolina, beginning as a spring in the Blue Ridge Mountains near Blowing Rock. All the way down through Caldwell County, it picks up strength and volume until it's a good-sized river when it enters Wilkes County at Elkville. Immediately following the Civil War, many private schools came into existence in Wilkes and adjoining counties. Edgewood Academy was one of these schools. Although the exact date it began operations is not known, it is known that it ceased to function in 1875, giving way to the more commodious institution, Moravian Falls Academy. Edgewood was a 1-room log building located a short distance west of Moravian Falls on the Lenoir Road. It served the community both as a school during the weekdays and as a non-denominational place of worship on Sunday. Some of the teachers at the school include Joe Gilreath, Miles Couch, and J.F. Spainhour, who seems to have been the last teacher of this academy. Among the private schools that have made a substantial contribution to education in Wilkes County was that of the Finley School from the early or mid-1890s to 1915 in North Wilkesboro. This school was instigated and governed by Finley families who were strong Presbyterians and furnished the locations of the schools and selected the teachers. Throughout its existence, it was always a one-teacher, one-room school. Among the private schools that have made a substantial contribution to education in Wilkes County was that of Finley School, that operated from the earlier mid-1890s to 1915 in North Wilkesboro. This school was instigated and governed by Finley families, who were strong Presbyterians, and who furnished the locations of the school and selected the teachers. Throughout its existence, it was always a one-teacher, one-room school.
My older sister attended Mount Carmel School. Might tell you a little about that. I remember the school even though I didn't attend it. And Ms. Inez Cardle lived at Mountain View, and she boarded with us. Of course, then you didn't have transportation. You didn't drive back and forth from Mountain View to Mount Carmel, so she boarded there, and Josie, my older sister, attended school, and they had just a one-room school and a chalkboard and some books, and I think the water, they carried it from a spring.
He told me that he was the advance man for President Gerald Ford, and that Gerald Ford was coming to North Carolina and visit some spots, different ones. He said, if you had that authority to take him and place him in different places, where would you take him? Well, immediately I said, Wilkes County. He landed at the West High Ball Field, and numerous people were there. They presented Gerald Ford with a bicentennial rifle, muzzle loader at that time, and we marched him into the gymnasium, and it was packed, people all over the hills, everywhere you could think of. Ronald Reagan came here that same year. He was, it was not the year he was elected president. He was running in a primary against President Ford. And I'm not familiar with all the ins and out of him coming here, but the best of my recollection, they flew him in on Elvis Presley's jet, and they brought him in up to our old airfield, and I think somebody said that they began to wonder if they're going to get that jet stopped because it was real short at that time. They brought him to the Holiday Inn and had a social or a little get-together, a reception, etc. And then they brought him to over to Sky City in North Wilkesboro and he was on a platform and made a speech, and there was a tremendous crowd there as well.
Basically, I was more, but I was a glorified messenger between Robert F. Kennedy and J. Edgar Hoover. And I knew Robert Kennedy personally, I knew J. Edgar Hoover personally. I saw during the Bay of Pigs, one incident I'll tell you. When this went down, Robert Kennedy, contrary to what you might believe about him, he was a party boy about town. And we had to find him because the whole world was blowing up with this Bay of Pigs thing.
The Wilkes County Greenway project is a very exciting adventure and opportunity for the town of Wilkesboro, North Wilkesboro, and Wilkes County. There's no way that we can lose with this Greenway project. It's a win-win-win situation.
Landowners, the Department of Transportation, foundations, and government granting agencies are also partners in the Greenway effort. But the most important partners in the project are the people of Wilkes County.